Morning, everybody. How's it going? It's Saturday, another beautiful sunny day. Unfortunately, we got our last dumping of the white shit on top of us, as we typically always do uh, here in Winnipeg, in the last little bit of March and even sometimes into April. Last week, left you off at when I made the decision to come back into uniform and in the North End, back home one more time, and talked about how dealing with some of the challenges, such as to have a heart to heart with someone in order to correct some of the issues that they were having, considering both the dynamics of friendship and the dynamics of shift well-being. And but I also had another challenge come up during my time there, and this was the first real family or personal challenge that I would say affected my ability um, to have my head in the game while I was at work. Um, and you know, it's a word that we often hear as cops when we're out dealing um, with people. And unfortunately, the negative aspect of it for us is that because we become so fucking jaded in seeing not just the worst of what people can do to each other, but how people abuse and milk the system and use reasons or excuses for their shit behavior. And that's the bulk of what we see. So when it comes to something like anxiety, um, which is which can sometimes be used in the wrong hands as sort of a coverall uh, for poor behavior or poor life choices, or the inability to adult, as they say nowadays. We run into people that we see that are frequent flyers or frequent callers. Um, the bulk of their stuff being mental health or suicidal feelings or calls for threats of suicide, that sort of thing. And that's something that I don't know what it's like everywhere else in Canada or the world over, but I mean, we have people doing that probably by the dozens, maybe not every day, but during the week. And we had certainly our handful of regular callers um, that would phone in 6, 7 times a week, sometimes multiple times a day. Um, and so when you see that on repeat over the course of years to decades, uh, of course, you know, you just have this disbelief in the validity of what most of these people are saying. And of course, Lord knows what the percentages are, but a good portion of the time it's fucking bullshit. And so you start to see not just that person as bullshit, but the words like suicide or anxiety or depression as, you know, just garbage things. They're not real. They're weaknesses, or they're just poor excuses that people use to milk the system with respect to financial assistance or with respect to medication, or you know, they use that as their inability to go out and work. uh, there's no denying that there are legitimate people by the tens of thousands um, that are plagued by issues like depression and anxiety. But unfortunately for us, um, it becomes near impossible to decipher a genuine person suffering and then someone using that to get attention or as an excuse. And, you know, so unless we're really unless we're personally hit by, uh, uh, you know, a blood or family um, issue with anxiety or depression, you know, it's not real. At least that's how I felt. I can't speak for all of us, uh, but we just, you know, it's just not real to us. It's just always the bullshit excuse ones. That's what sticks with us the most because that's what we see the most. But until it hits you at home, you don't give it much thought. And so partway through my return to uniform, well, that's exactly what happened to me. Um, and you know, my daughter had an event happen at her new school, and it's, you know, it's bad enough when any young child leaves a place of familiarity. So, you know, you got all your friends at one school. It's a smaller school. You know lots of people, and then so she left and went to high school, to a school where she knew no one, had no friends, and on the first day of being there, some young piece of shit boy did something and said something to her that just caused a freak of panic. It was something that the school resource officer investigated. Unfortunately, that person wasn't much of an investigator at all and did the bare minimum of work. I got the phone call while I was babysitting somebody. My partner and I were babysitting somebody at hospital for a psych assessment. And I got the phone call from the school resource officer, who was very kind and polite, and I appreciated the phone call and the near immediate contact after something had happened. You know, and it was a process that, of course, immediately the daddy guard went up, and I was upset, and but you know, I didn't know this person, so I was careful not to say anything I shouldn't say over the phone. And of course, I was in the hospital around other people, and I didn't want them hearing what my true feelings were. But I was just, well, it was like a fucking gut punch. It was like getting speared with the butt end of a hockey stick while you're in full speed. It hurt. And because I wasn't there, I couldn't do anything about it, and I couldn't interfere in the process. I mean, I could have, had I chosen to, but that would have been the wrong thing to do. And so this officer took a statement, and well, something that not because of his doing, but you know, whenever the school board's involved, they got a whole different set of rules and optics. And unfortunately, even though this was a serious event, it wasn't anything that required hospitalization or medical treatment, but it was serious because, you know, in the morality of things, it was fucking wrong. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't funny. It wasn't something that was excusable. But you know, you can't step in there and direct the investigation when you're the parent of the victim, despite the fact that you're an officer. You have to let the investigating officer do their job. And I had no clue who this person was. I didn't know their reputation or whatever. Regardless, the school board stepped in, and you know, it becomes that concern of optics. It becomes at the school, what's going on there, how it's handled, and you know, it just nowadays, it's not like the fucking 70s and 80s when I went to grade school. And Christ, when you got shit, you were physically disciplined. You know, it started with throwing a piece of chalk and then getting the Bible thrown at you, and then being hit with a meter stick if you didn't correct your fucking behavior. But I understood and respected those rules and boundaries, and it taught me lifelong lessons. Nowadays at school, you know, we don't want to crush a person's fucking spirit, or we don't want to negatively affect, you know, an offender's chance of becoming a good person, or their schooling being wrecked or destroyed, or their soul being crushed. You don't want to punish someone because it's going to negatively affect them, and that's the kind of fucking bullshit that's going on at schools nowadays. And there's as much, if not more, concern on the part of the offender that they don't want to go overboard in their punishment, because they're young and they're kids, and it's just such a fucking crock of shit. And anyway, so that's what happened. The one positive thing out of it is that piece of shit that assaulted my daughter and scared and caused her a whole lot of fucking mental anguish. At least that person who had a history within the school system, at least they were kicked out of school, and ultimately, I forget how quickly, but they were transferred to another school. And so that's positive. But I still think, and obviously I'm biased, I still think it should have gone further than that. But when you physically, sexually assault someone, of course, there's varying degrees of the severity of that offense, and you say something that causes them pain, well, you should be fucking punished. Because what lesson do they learn if they're not? None. Well, no, that's not true. The lesson that they learn is they can continue to get away with that behavior. And, we as a society, in terms of raising our kids, have a generationally, I hope that pronounced and sounded good, we failed in that regard. And things have become too easy and too soft for kids to get away with. But regardless, so, you can just imagine what that does to a young girl. And my daughter was. And I was fucking furious. There's only it's different for a father and a mother, so I just say that to express my feelings and emotion. Only a father can understand the toenail digging through your boot soles kind of fury when you get a phone call like that. But you have to be cautious as to how you react at work, and also keeping in mind that your child's well-being over your feelings is priority. And so I had to fix the problem. Well, that's how I approached it. That's how I feel, because all my friends that know me know that, like, carpentry-wise or electrical-wise, I can't fix shit. But this was a problem that I had to fix. The physical safety and well-being of my wife and daughter come before my own, and as do the mental well-being. But it was causing me the inability to be there for her as required and deal with it while my uniform shift work, I didn't have what I needed to deal with it at home. That schedule affected that. And so for the first time in my career, I was at, not a crossroads, but I was in a real fucking tight spot, because I had to figure out how to handle this. I knew that my priority was my daughter, not my job. In comparison, I could give a fuck about my reputation. Years earlier, I was selfish and I was concerned about my reputation and, how certain moves that I might make in my career will affect me in the future. And there were considerations in light of this that I had to think about that sort of thing, but there was no weighing which one was more important, because I knew the answer to that, and that was her. So I had to, the right thing to do, respecting privacy of the issue, is I had to take this to my bosses. I had to tell them what's going on, because your subordinates I mean, you got to really, not your subordinates, your peers. You have to really pick and choose what you tell people on this job, because you never know how it's going to come back and bite you in the ass or affect you. But your bosses need to know what's going on if your head's not in the game, if you're not your usual self at work, because you might make mistakes. And those mistakes, you know, can be procedural things, but they can also affect your work ethic and or officer safety or public safety decisions you have to make. If you're, you know, if you're not, your mind's not in it as much as it should be. So I took it to my supervisors, and unfortunately, I really got a mix of support and negativity. Most of them were good, most of the time. But I also had one of them say to me, "Are you sure that this is the best thing for your career right now?" And why that was said was because I said I need to find an accommodated spot so that I can be at home when I'm needed. And so when a boss that you respect and admire says something like that to you, that's also a real gut punch, because you know you have this person who has supported you in the past, guided you in the past, directed you in the past, and has been a go-to for advice on how to handle mostly political aspects of the job. So then you have them say something like that, and it's hard to take because you just feel like, well, I'm pouring my heart out to you. My issues are real and legitimate, and I want to do the right thing in terms of handling the situation. I have never been, and am not now, someone who's asked to be accommodated for bullshit reasons to avoid being a street cop, to avoid working shift work, to avoid working nights. We got over 100 of those fucking people in our organization, and I've never been one of those. I had a legitimate issue that I needed help with. But I also had a supervisor that was nothing but supportive and understanding, and they could see that this was real and that I needed to do something about it. And I didn't know that at the time that member services such like going to see the police psychologist or psychiatrist. I always get those two fucking things mixed up. Anyway, the person that we see in critical incidents and issues, that family counseling is for family members is also included in that. So, word to everybody that's out there, if you're having issues, or if your family members are having issues, and you're comfortable with going to see the service psychiatrist, service psych, I'll abbreviate it so we know what I mean and that I'm not wrong. Do it, because pride and ego and reputation mean fuck all in comparison to family mental health and well-being. It doesn't even come close. Your reputation, don't fucking think that way. Sort your shit out at home first. Be there for those who are most important. And that's what I did. And so I found out soon after having those discussions with my supervisors, that there was a position coming open within the division that was a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 kind of thing. But it was what we call the SPY person. Smart Policing Initiative. Another bullshit acronym for tracking stats to make us look good, to say, here's what we did to make things better. It was really just a way of compiling and documenting proactive policing and dealing with community issues and crime hotspots, trendy fucking words, on top of just answering calls for service. And I'll talk more about that in another video, because I'm starting to ramble on and we're getting close to the 20-minute mark. So, and this position dealt with a lot of software systems and stats compiling and all that kind of fucking shit that I was like complete useless tool with. Partners and shift mates of mine will be able to vouch for that. That I can be frustrating when to deal with or to help when it comes to technology. But this position afforded me the ability to work during the day, be at home in the evening and on weekends, which, you know, my daughter needed. And it meant that I had to learn and be comfortable with things that I was completely useless at. But, you know, that decision I made easily within a day. And thankfully, but I treated it like any other job. Even though the situation I had needed an accommodated spot, I treated it like any other position ever. I didn't just expect to get it because I had a problem or because of who I was, because of what was going on at home. I didn't expect to just be awarded something. So when I had a meeting with the staff sergeant and inspector of my division at that time, you know, I just said, okay, well, I'd like to apply. And I remember the staff sergeant saying, when can you start? And I said, well, I don't expect to, sir, I don't just expect to be given something because of what's going on. And he said again, can you start tomorrow? And I said, well, how about I start on Monday or something like that? Because it would have been a Friday, the day before the weekend. The person that was in that position at the time was retiring. They could give me, you know, a few weeks to train with that person, and you know, I was forever thankful for being given that spot. And there was more to it than that. What I mean by that is there was another person. So that position in itself is in the back office where the detectives were and whatnot. But you're in this sharing office space, having conversations, hearing things being said, joining in on the conversations. And there was another person that wasn't desired or well thought of, that the sergeants in charge of detectives and the detectives themselves did not want in that space. So when they heard that I was going, they were very happy about that, which is, you know, very heartwarming, because it means, you know, that they're happy with me and comfortable with me being there. So that was, you know, that's a compliment, because there are plenty of people who don't want me anywhere near them, or supervisors or peers or in divisions that they work in for various reasons of having their feathers ruffled or me speaking my mind. But this was a group of people who knew me and were very welcoming. I could keep going on this topic, and there's still more to talk about the position itself and whatnot, but I'll stop because I'm going to lose your attention soon, and I'll pick up and finish it off in the next episode. So until then, love you guys, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember that if you're feeling like shit and you're having a hard time at work, talk to someone, anybody, a good friend, a peer support member, a family member. Deal with yourself, because it's how we overcome those difficulties and challenges that make us tough and strong. Ignoring them or suppressing them doesn't. Take care.